Hello friends, I am Sharad Vaze, practicing chartered accountant for more than 38 years and also handling disciplinary cases for 16-17 years. Today I will be speaking on clause 5 and clause 6 of schedule 2 part 1 of the respective statutes, namely Chartered Accountants Act, Cost and Works Accountants Act, as well as the Company Secretaries Act, which deals with a professional in practice. So, what the clause 5 says, it reads like this: a professional misconduct in relation to a chartered accountant in practice shall be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he fails to disclose a material fact known to him which is not disclosed in a financial statement, but disclosure of which is necessary in making such financial statement where he is concerned with that financial statement in a professional capacity. So, what the clause refers to failure to disclose a material fact which is known to him in a financial statement and on which he has issued a statement. So, the financial statement, even though it's prepared by the management, as is normally the case, the material misstatements must be so included, must be disclosed specifically in such financial statements, and if it is not so disclosed, to which a professional is concerned in professional capacity, in that case it will amount to a professional misconduct. Now, the important word in this clause is materiality. It says fails to disclose material fact known to him. So, a particular fact is known to him which is material, and that fact must be disclosed in the financial statement to which he is concerned. Now, what is the material or what is materiality? The term materiality is defined in SA 320, SA Standards of Auditing 320. Accordingly, it says generally misstatements including omissions are considered to be material. It covers two things: misstatements as well as omissions are considered to be material if they individually or in the aggregate could reasonably expect to influence the economic decision of the users. So, clause 1 says misstatements including omissions, if individually or in the aggregate, could reasonably be expected to influence. That means if the that fact, misstatement or omission is included in financial statement, what would have been the decision if disclosed, and if not disclosed, if that decision is diverged, then it is material. For example, if the company has got preference shares, and as per Schedule 3 to the Companies Act 2013, you are aware that we had to state the terms of redemption of preference share, the rate of dividend, whether it is participating, non-participating, cumulative, non-cumulative, etc. So these are the material facts must be included in the financial statement, must be disclosed. Now, if it is not so disclosed, whether the stakeholder or the person taking economic decision based upon the information, will he take the decision if this fact would have been disclosed? If the answer is no, then it is a material misstatement or material omission. Because if the fact would have been disclosed, a particular shareholder or a particular investor would not have done the investment, or if the fact is disclosed, then knowingly he will make the investment. That decision making process, his economic decisions by the user, is important in determining whether it is material or not. In one case in which I have handled this particular issue, where the redemption or terms of preferential issues were not disclosed in a private company technically, which was a subsidiary of a public limited company. So automatically it was also become a public company, but deemed public company as per the 1956 provisions. Now, for non-disclosure of the terms of issue of preference shares, a concerned professional was held guilty. He was reprimanded and levied a fine by the disciplinary committee. So what is required, that the failure to disclose or failure to state any material misstatement to which you are concerned as an auditor, and in that case whether it is material or not, it is to be looked from the point of view of the user and not from the point of view of the auditor. That is the most important aspect. Second statement, which SA 320 says, that judgments about the materiality are made in the light of surrounding circumstances and are affected by the size or nature of misstatement or a combination of both. So when there is a statutory disclosure, if it is omitted, then it is material omission. But otherwise, where a judgment about the material is to be exercised by the professional, in that case, the size and nature is equally important. And in the same case, where the auditor has failed to, or the balance sheet failed to disclose the terms and conditions as to the preference share capital, where the committee has held him guilty. In the same case, the company was in receipt of dividend, and as per Schedule 6 to the Companies Act 1956, and especially with reference to the requirements of Part 2 relating to profit and loss statement, if the dividend is subject to tax deduction at source, then the amount of TDS must be disclosed. So in that particular profit and loss account, the company has disclosed a dividend amount, say 10,000 rupees, and where from that 1,000 tax was deducted at source. So obviously gross amount was disclosed in the credit side of the profit and loss account, and into the bracket he should have disclosed TDS rupees 1,000. So considering into account this 1,000 is not that material individually or in the aggregate, the committee has held for this part of only non-disclosure not guilty, because it was not material. So otherwise 10,000 inner column, and again I could convey the committee at that time that 1,000 TDS is disclosed in the current assets, in loans and advances, TDS from dividends 1,000, so there is adequate disclosure. Only disclosure was in the outer column 10,000 rupees, and as a inner column TDS 1,000, that was not disclosed. So that should not be the reason for holding a person negligent, for the simple reason 1,000 rupees is a negligible amount, is not material in the particular facts and circumstances of the case. Fortunately, the committee has considered that materiality aspect, because in reality it was only 1,000 rupees dividend, and held him not guilty on that count. But failure to disclose the terms and conditions of preference shares, and which are disclosure is statutorily required, where the committee has held him guilty. The third one is the judgments about matters that are material to the users as a group. The possible effect of misstatement on a specific individual user whose needs may vary widely is not considered. That means the materiality is to be looked from the user's point of view, but user as a group, not individually. For instance, if a particular shareholder wants a particular information to be disclosed in the financial statement, and if it is not so disclosed, it may not be material from his point, from that point of view, or from that individual shareholder's point of view it might be material, but as a group, shareholders taken as a group, it may not be material. So what is to be looked into? The materiality or the usability of that particular disclosure or omission from the point of view of a group of persons, group of users, and not individual. because the financial statements are prepared for various stakeholders and not for a particular stakeholder, not for a particular shareholder. Exceptions are obviously there. When we prepare tax audit reports, the tax audit reports are meant for the income tax department, may not be useful to other users of the financial statements, and that's why the clause specifically states that the misstatement or omission is with respect to reporting as well as income tax department so far as tax assessments and tax audit is concerned. Now, material is to be judged with reference to balance sheet and profit and loss account independently. In a sense, a particular misstatement or omission may be material from the balance sheet point of view and may not be so from the profit and loss point of view, or vice versa, that is immaterial. In a sense, a particular statement may not be material from profit and loss account point of view, but it is material from balance sheet point of view. That fact must be disclosed. That is what clause 5 says, and if it is not so disclosed, to which the auditor is concerned, then he is held guilty or he can be held guilty for professional misconduct. Now, the words financial statements would cover both reports and certificates, and for the purpose of income tax assessment also, the one I had just referred. However, and this is more interesting, however, such reports prepared by members in employment purely for information of their respective employer are excluded, as such reports are not submitted to outsiders. I repeat this clause because I want to make some submission on this issue. Such reports prepared by members in employment purely for information of their respective employer and excluded, as such reports are not submitted to outsiders. So, what is the status of internal audit? If internal audits are to be given to the management only and it is not available to outsiders, whether disclosure or omission, whether internal auditor can be held guilty for professional misconduct, my humble submission is he cannot be held guilty on this ground because, see, basically, Schedule 2, Part 1 applies specifically to professional in practice. So, entire clause 5 is applicable to a practicing professional. If that is the case, then where is the scope for member in employment? So, employment not in employer-employee relationship, that is what I want to say. Because professional chartered accounting practicing firms are also conducting internal audits of companies. And they are giving reports to the management only. The internal audit reports are not available to other stakeholders. They are prepared only to the management, and the internal audit scope of internal audit is also determined by the management. So, my understanding or my submission is under this clause 5, the internal auditor should not be held guilty because his reports are meant only to the management. His scope is also determined by the management, and more importantly, he is employed by the management and for information of their respective employer, that is management. Now, next clause is clause 6, which is the consequence of this clause 6. It says, fails to report a material misstatement known to him to appear in a financial statement with which he is concerned in a professional capacity. So, clause 5 deals with failure to disclose material fact known to him in the financial statement, and clause 6 refers to failure to report a material misstatement known to him. So, two things are different. Failure to disclose to which he is concerned in the preparation of financial statement, he must disclose it. And having disclosed in the financial statement, his job as an auditor is not over. That misstatement must be reported by the auditor. So job of an auditor is twofold. One thing, to ensure disclosure of misstatement or omission in the financial statement, number one. And number two, even after such disclosure, bringing out that misstatement or omission in his report. Two things are separate. If there is no disclosure, that fact must be reported by the auditor. If it is disclosed, still that fact must be reported by the auditor in his audit report. So that is the scope of clause 5 and clause 6. Next, clause 7 is the most important, because almost 70-80% of the cases are falling in clause number 7, which states that the auditor does not exercise due diligence or grossly negligent in the conduct of his professional duties. So what is gross negligence? What is due diligence? We are going to see in next lecture. If you like the video, subscribe it, like it, and pass it on to your friends who are concerned with the profession of chartered accountancy, cost accountancy, and company secretaries. Thank you very much.